noon. I don't want to keep us waiting any longer. Thank you everyone for bearing with us with some technical difficulties. Rich and I are both at the town hall right now. So we have ran into a little few issues, but thank you everyone so much for joining us today for the public.
Whoops.
Sorry, someone muted me. Thank you everyone for joining us for the public information session for the EarthTec treatment of harmful algal blooms in Skaneateles Lake. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Camille Marcotte and I'm the water and ecology educator with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Onondaga County. I'm going to go over a few quick things and then I'll turn it over to our presenters and speakers. We are using Zoom in webinar mode right now, so you are all muted. Just so there's no background noise, but you should be able to hear and see the presenters and panelists. So if for some reason you're experiencing any audio and or visual issues, please let me know and I will do my best to help you troubleshoot. We're going to be waiting until the end to answer any questions and I will be facilitating those. Feel free to type any questions into the Q&A box. And if you use a Q&A function, you can ask questions anonymously too. If you can't use the Q&A option for some reason, you can also type your questions in the chat box and I'll be monitoring both of those for when we get to the question and answer portion. That's all from me. So I will turn it over to our first speaker, Matt Marco, who is the Region 7 Director with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and he will be offering some opening remarks.
Took me a while to figure.
Thank you, Camille. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sounds good.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the City of Syracuse for allowing me the opportunity to make some remarks here at the start of the meeting. I'd like to, these remarks, of course, are focused on the draft Speedies permit for Skaneateles Lake EarthTec application. Let me start by saying that harmful algal blooms have been detected in various locations in Skaneateles Lake, an unfiltered drinking water source for the city of Syracuse and surrounding communities. HABs are dense amounts of bacteria similar to algae that can produce toxins that can be harmful to people and animals. The city began discussions with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation in April of 2019 regarding the use of the pesticide EarthTec, which has an active ingredient of 19.8% copper sulfate in targeted areas of Skaneateles Lake to protect the public water supply from excessive algae growth and the development of HABs. Pesticides used in New York State must be registered with the US EPA and DEC. All aquatic pesticide applications must be conducted by a New York State certified pesticide applicator. The pesticide EarthTec is registered for use by the Bureau of Pesticides Management Product Registration Section and has been deployed in water bodies and drinking water sources across the state. Generally, aquatic pesticide applications in New York State are permitted under the State Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or Speedies, Pesticide General Permit, which works closely with other DEC programs such as the Aquatic Pesticide Program. However, out of an abundance of caution and to afford the public an opportunity to provide input and allow DEC to impose additional permit conditions, DEC is requiring the city to apply for an individual Speedies permit instead of that general permit. The DEC and the city have mutually agreed to extend deadlines for this permit review process as follows. We are extending the public comment period to October 1st, 2021. We are extending the hearing decision date to November 12th, 2021. And we are extending the final permit decision date to February 28th, 2022. The draft Speedies permit currently out for public comment includes several additional site-specific control measures imposed by the DEC and highlights I'm going to provide very briefly here right now. Public notification. Notification to the public is required 48 hours prior to the date of application. And forgive me, some of this may be in the city's presentation, but we want to make sure that it's clear that this is in our draft permit. The city of Syracuse must provide notification to numerous folks, including the New York State Department of Health, Onondaga County Health Department, the DEC, Skaneateles Lake Association, elected officials of the village of Skaneateles and the town of Skaneateles, riparian owners, and users within the treatment area. And if the treatment will occur within 100 feet of any of the beaches, resources of the beach, a resource manager of the Skaneateles Country Club's bathing area, the village of Skaneateles' bathing area, or the village of Skaneateles Pier or DEC boat launch, those folks must also be notified. As we said, the permit application must be completed by a certified New York State commercial applicator or a New York State certified commercial technician working under the direct supervision of a certified applicator, and the treatment using EarthTec must be in accordance with the product label, instructions, and requirements. That's true for all pesticides applications. Water quality monitoring must be conducted. Post-application water quality monitoring is required within 24 hours following treatment to verify the pesticide byproduct concentrations, including cyanobacterial toxin Microsystem, are at safe levels to resume routine water use and recreation. Monitoring is required for treatment within 100 feet of those bathing resources, bathing beaches, and other resources I mentioned previously. And water quality sampling must continue for 14 days following treatment unless the Microsystem concentration is recorded less than 4 micrograms per liter. Micrograms per liter, also known as parts per billion. Microsystem action levels are also noted in the permit. If the Microsystem concentration is greater than or equal to 4 micrograms per liter, which the reason that number was selected, that is the New York State Department of Health's guidance, a guidance value below which bathing areas may reopen. The city will then notify local and state health departments within 24 hours of the concentration being greater than 4. The city will also notify those beach managers within 24 hours for the purpose of coordinating postings as directed by local or state health departments for those beaches. And lastly, as far as key elements of the permit, draft permit here, public comment. A draft permit was first made available to the public on July 14th, 2021. The public comment period was extended and now runs through October 1st, 2021. DEC will determine whether to hold a formal legislative, which is a public statement hearing in accordance with New York State regulations. The decision to hold a public hearing must be made by November 12th, 2021. Regardless of whether a public hearing is held, DEC will consider all comments received and make a decision regarding issuance of the permit by February 28th, 2022. As a regulator, DEC must act upon the permit application before us in a thorough manner while proactively and comprehensively addressing public concerns. In recognition of the high level of public interest in this permit application, I mentioned the deadline has been extended, but comments may be submitted to the attention of Karen Hansen by email to DEP permitting, that's DEP PERMITTING at dec.ny.gov, or by mail to New York State DEC headquarters, 625 Broadway, Albany, New York, 12233. All comments submitted before the extended deadline will be of October 1st will be thoroughly reviewed by DEC before making any final decision on the permit application. DEC appreciates this opportunity to present this information at the start of the meeting, and we are here to listen to the presentation from the city and observe the question and answer session. Thank you.
Great. right, thank you so much, Matt, for those opening remarks. Our next speaker is Rich Abbott, Public Health Sanitarian with the City of Syracuse Water Department, Division of Skaneateles Lake Watershed Programs. So I will turn it over to you, Rich.
Thanks, Camille. So I'd like to start out by actually talking about some of the public comments that were raised earlier in the 30-day comment period. A couple of the initial comments were regarding the ecosystem concerns about using EarthTec. If you're looking at the slide up there now, in 2017, as most of you know, we had a pretty harmful event. What you're seeing here is a nearshore ecosystem that's impacted. One of our goals for EarthTec actually is to restore a healthy balance to an impaired water body if in case we have another 2017 event. So actually we'd be using copper to rebalance the ecosystem. Our main concern is to control the density of harmful producing bacteria. In this case, it was Microsystem or Microsystem. So that is our goal. One of the other main concerns with use of EarthTec was settling out of copper into the sediments. Take note that actually EarthTec stays in suspension. It can stay in suspension up to 2 weeks. So settling out and actually disturbing the benthic ecosystem is not as much of a concern with EarthTec as it would be with, say, a copper product, as in copper sulfate, where the copper settles out, quite quickly within sometimes 24 to 48 hours. So I just wanted to point out too that our benthic ecosystem in Skaneateles is already impaired with pretty much the lake bottom in most areas is covered with zebra mussels and quagga mussels. So let's talk a little bit about our treatment process at this point. The city of Syracuse has an unfiltered water source. Really, our only barrier to toxin protection right now is chlorine. We have a few chlorine points of entry throughout at our intakes, and we can reintroduce chlorine at our in the village, but we have no backup plan at this point if toxin levels were to increase to a point where chlorine would be a concern at the levels we can treat with. Taking a look at your contact time of chlorine. So if you're a village resident, you're drawing off our intake lines with 23 minutes of contact time with chlorine. So they're pretty much the city's first customer. If you're a city resident drawing water through our distribution system, you have about 323 minutes of contact time with chlorine. If you're drawing water directly from the lake, you have no protection from toxins drawing in through your system. If anyone has ever toured a water treatment facility that is a filtered system, you'd realize that these systems are pretty expansive. Some of these are the size of a football field. If you look at the EPA's website, if you're a filtered water system, you have a couple of pages of information on how you can treat for cyanotoxins. A lot of our local lakes in the Finger Lakes, they have activated carbon. They can add to their treatment train with powdered carbon, with granular carbon. So there's a lot more options if your water is filtered than if you're an unfiltered water supply. So after 2017, the city sat down with Onondaga County Emergency Planning. We sat down with the Department of Health, the local health departments, come up with an action plan on how we would actually address another event like 2017. So our long-term actions are actually extending our shallow water intake. We can almost double the length of that intake, giving us a lot more contact time for chlorine. Short-term actions, we talked about suppression of harmful algae blooms and different in-lake treatments to kind of be a backup for chlorine. It's important to look at some of the research that's gone on different copper products. In general, the option of doing nothing is a risk. When you treat for density of in our case, Microsystem colonies, what you're doing is reducing the amount of cells out there that can actually produce toxins. So there's been a lot of research out there that shows that leaving a water body untreated, you're allowing microcysts to grow unchecked, right? So you're kind of at the mercy of when they decide that they've had enough. It's another example of some of the research that's been done that shows how dense microcystis colonies can be, and after a short period of time, how EarthTec could be effective in actually reducing those the density. Part of our permit is there's some trigger mechanisms to go in before we would use EarthTec, and one of the key mechanisms is we're going to see microcystin actually in our raw water intakes. So at a level of 0.3 micrograms per liter, we would start really paying attention to what the surrounding water body at the north end of the lake looks like. We have consecutive days of microcystin in our raw water intakes, and we're actually going to start looking at a lot of other things as far as dense cell densities of microcystis colonies near shore. We're going to look closely at our intakes. So there's going to be a lot of sampling, a lot of testing that's done to confirm that actually the blooms that we're seeing are actually microcystis blooms. Over the last several years, I've ran around to a lot of bloom reports, and a lot of them have been just a mix of species that we see consistently, a lot of diatoms, a lot of green algae. So in those cases, we're necessarily not going to treat. We're looking for targeted heavy densities of microcystis. So why EarthTec? EarthTec is a registered product by the EPA. It's been registered since 1991, and it's been used pretty consistently throughout the country. In New York State, the dosage for EarthTec has been reduced significantly from the EPA registration in their label. So the max dose for EarthTec in New York State is 0.18 milligrams per liter. So that's significantly less than the EPA label. Example of where EarthTec has been used throughout the country. So this is a page out of our Speedies permit. Again, there's the max dose. We possibly could treat a lot lower. We were looking at a target rate of possibly 0.06 parts per million. There's no restrictions on the EarthTec label, the EPA label. So it's used for recreation, it's used in swimming pools. There is, used in drinking water. A lot of the Speedies permit preparation went into looking at copper research, looking at the safety of using different copper products. And what has been established and presented to the DEC as far as of using this product is that if it's used at the label rate or lower, it's a safe product. There's been reports, that you could probably find where there's been issues with applying copper products. A lot of times there hasn't been, they've been used above the label. They've treated whole water bodies instead of actually treating a portion of the water body. So in this case, for Skaneateles Lake, we'd be treating a very, very limited part of the entire water body of Skaneateles Lake. Here's the treatment zone. If you're in the treatment zone, if you're a lakefront resident, what could you expect to see after an EarthTec application? For one, you're probably going to see very improved water clarity. Copper works very fast. So you may see an increase in water clarity also. When we treat for copper in Woodland Reservoir, our open water reservoir, within minutes, you can see a green tint on the water surface go to blue. So you will see increased water clarity and color almost immediately. It's hard to talk about algae control in Skaneateles Lake without talking about some of the history and the amount of copper and how it's been used in the past. We're almost approaching 100 years of using some type of copper within the city water supply system, whether it's our open water reservoirs or the open water of Skaneateles Lake. So here's just a list of some of the algae that we have treated for in the past. In the past, the lake was treated for either taste and odor algae. So Microsystem wasn't even a thought back in the 40s and 50s. It was more of nuisance species that were trying to be controlled. Dr. Henry Meyer and Dr. Jackson, both professors up at SU, they were researchers, and they were contracted through the city of Syracuse to run our copper sulfate program. Between the two of them, they had several decades of treating copper in Skaneateles Lake. I would probably argue that Skaneateles is the most documented form of research that's been done on copper products and algae control, maybe in the country. Some of the reports that we've put together and looked at for going into this DEC permit was a lot of history on blooms in Skaneateles. You'd be surprised to look at all the problems that have happened over the years in blooms in Skaneateles Lake, dating back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. Significant blooms occurred on Skaneateles Lake. So here's just a couple examples of reports that have been documented. And the amount of copper that was used, even though it looks extremely high, you're looking at several tons used annually. Keep in mind that Skaneateles Lake is a 412 billion gallon reservoir. So it looks like a lot, but the application rate is pretty low. A couple of other examples of the amount of product that's been used over the years in Skaneateles Lake. Again, 5 tons used down in 1964. So water blooms, again, they weren't called HABs back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but Microsystem was commonly found. And if you look at the bottom of the highlighted section here, there's been years where they were more than just localized events. So copper has been used not only for taste and odor, but actually for Microsystems in the past. Again, the concentration limit for copper for drinking water source is 1 part per million of copper. If you look at the history of what we've applied to Woodland Reservoir and Skaneateles Lake, it's much less than that. Probably a quarter of a part per million has been the highest that we've applied. If you look at the EarthTec, application rate is significantly lower than what we've been used for copper. And just for comparison, in your daily multivitamin, you can have up to 2 parts per million of copper. Below is just some of the examples of how much copper has been used in Skaneateles Lake at different time frames. So alternatives to copper. Nobody's a bigger fan of ultrasound and aeration than I am. We've had gone through probably 3 or 4 different generations of ultrasound at this point. I sleep a lot better at night knowing that 24/7 I have these devices working in our open water reservoir. I know their limitations. I know the limitations of copper. I've worked with copper for years. But I'd like to have copper as an insurance policy. Even with all this technology, algae don't play by the rules that we set out for them. they have that kind of home court advantage of being in their environment, right? So a lot of times when we think everything's going good, you know, I may come up to the reservoir the next morning and wow, things have changed. So the stockpile of copper that I have in our reservoir will remain there. And you know what we're looking for here is just another insurance policy. Another way of saying, look, if chlorine gets overwhelmed, if we have an issue where you know the algae blooms, they're not cooperating with what we're expecting, we're going to have a backup plan to our backup plan. So that's the goal of this application, is actually to be able to use copper if needed, and use EarthTec only if the triggers are met through our permit application. And like Matt had mentioned earlier, that all the notifications are made and everything is according to the permit. So, and I'll stop with that.
Great, thank you so much, Rich. We have one more presentation for you all. So our last speaker before the question and answer portion is Dr. David Hammond, who is the Vice President of Applications Development at Earth Science Labs. So, yep, I can see your screen. It looks great, David.
Thanks, Camille. Hello, everyone. I just have a couple minutes of comments. The title of my little presentation is EarthTec Ionic Copper, a more rational use of copper. And I hope by the end of the presentation will understand why that's the title. Trying to advance to the next screen, and so it's not.
David, this is Ed. Your audio sounds really weird, real echoed to me.
I'm going to stop sharing and try sharing again.
That sounds much better.
That sounds better.
Yeah.
Okay. Stop sharing again and try one more time. I don't know why it's not advancing. I'm so sorry, I don't know what the problem is. I can't advance to the next slide.
Do you have two PowerPoint things open? Like, is there one that's in PowerPoint and one that's in slideshow mode? You could try sharing a different screen, or you could just try sharing your actual
Yeah, that's
screen
true. Let me
itself.
see if I can. Let's see if it works. There we go. Thank you for the suggestion coming up on that little pitch. Okay, so just briefly, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on who I am, so you know who you're hearing from. My background is in environmental science. I have a master's from UC Berkeley from the Energy and Resources Group, which is an environmental science program. I have a PhD from UC Berkeley, also in agricultural and environmental chemistry. I worked for several years at Berkeley studying algae, the good algae that we were using to clean water, specifically for wastewater treatment to make reclaimed water.
David, sorry,
David,
your audio is still really bad.
Okay, how about this? Is this better?
That's better.
yeah,
Okay.
that's better.
And I was also the founder of a nonprofit organization in Guatemala where we taught techniques of
David's bad again.
Yeah, your audio's still cutting out for some reason.
Oh, boy. Well, it's just coming and going, huh?
No, that you sound good right now. It gets
Okay,
real
I'll
try
echoey
to stay
and
in this
faint.
exact position. Okay, so I was the founder of a nonprofit organization. We
techniques of organic agriculture. I'm also author on 2 patents for pesticides that are derived from plant ingredients, and I'm co-author of a book about green chemistry along with Paul Anastas, who is widely regarded as the father of green chemistry. And I just share this background with you because I know a lot of the audience is concerned about.
David,
it's that again.
Dave, it's bad.
yeah. Do you think you could try calling in possibly? Or I don't know if like where your mic is, but maybe trying to stay a little closer to your mic.
Well, I tried closer and I tried farther. I can call in.
Yeah, I think that might work.
I apologize for. Do you know the meeting ID, Camille?
Yes. The ID is 973-7618-7230.
It says I'm an attendee and will be muted. Can you switch that off?
Yes. I'm not sure what phone number is yours.
Starts with 510.
Oh yeah, okay, perfect. I see it. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Can you?
Oh, I could hear you for a second. It sounds like you just muted again. Oh, you guys can all hear him? Okay, good.
You're saying he's not on mute. I saw that on the, I can't hear him.
Well, I
Yeah.
had to unmute. I mean, I had to mute myself on the computer in order for you to hear me through the phone, but it doesn't sound like you're hearing me through the phone.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I guess you're hearing me through the computer.
It sounds better.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just keep going then, and if, yeah. So the point of all that was just to let you know that I have a background in environmental science and I'm concerned about the environment, and I know a lot of the people in the audience are as well. And so I don't come at the use of chemicals lightly. It's only through, judicious decision-making processes that we arrive at a decision to use a chemical to control a pest. I wanted to share, I put together a little montage of headlines about 5 years ago that documented the rise of toxic algal blooms around the country. And we were talking about this recently. It's 5 years later, and it's interesting to see that it is no better. And even in just the last month or so, there have been some very alarming headlines, not only from around the country, but around the world. In the case of, maybe some of you heard about 330 elephants died in Southern Africa due to drinking water that was had harmful algal blooms in it. But lots of events, even in the New York region as well. So things are not getting better. This is something we need to learn how to cope with. And that's true across the country. This is a USGS, US Geological map showing the frequency and the intensity of the blooms are increasing around the country. Cyanotoxins are, there's no good concentration to have. You don't want any. There's really, we've established a level below which, it's considered to be.
All right, David, it's real bad again.
Okay, we may have to just skip over then. I don't know.
Well, you sound good now. It sounds like you're getting far from the phone.
Oh, okay.
You sound good right now.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to stay in one place. But the point of this
Now
slide,
you're gone.
I haven't moved at all. So, I don't know. Shoot. Well, the point of this slide is that there are many bigger problems with cyanotoxins than there are with concerns about the use of something like copper to control them. With cyanotoxins, there's no good level to have. It's on the World Health Organization's list of possible carcinogens. It's been linked to the creation of problems like ALS and Alzheimer's, and it's directly linked to deaths of many animals and even people. Whereas in the case of copper, people are concerned about use of copper, but copper is an essential micronutrient. We absolutely need it. There's copper in our multivitamins, and there's a recommended daily requirement for copper. It's also present in the Earth's crust. It's the 26th most abundant chemical or element rather in the Earth's crust, and it's safe for use in drinking and consuming at the labeled rates. So while we're still learning more about cyanotoxins, my point is that we know quite a bit about copper, and we know that it's a micronutrient, and that there are levels at which it is not just safe, but actually required. And EarthTec has been used in many drinking water treatment plants. Hundreds of municipal water utilities apply or are applying EarthTec into their drinking water right now to control different types of cyanobacteria and algae. It's also used in swimming pools. I know some people were expressing concern about the possibility that they might go swimming in this lake after EarthTec has been applied to control an algal cyanobacteria.
David,
that again?
Yeah, it's got really, people just can't hear you. Camille, can you advance the presentation? Just let David talk.
Yeah, David, can you try to see if you can speak into the phone, and then I can just, if you can share your presentation with me, just email it to me, then I can just share my screen, and then that way folks should be able to hear you through the phone.
You can just say next. I've had to do that before. Because a lot of people are sending in chat saying they just can't hear them.
Well, I mean, how's it going to work if you're not hearing me on the phone either?
But right now you sound really clear, and then as soon as you start the presentation, it goes bad.
Yeah.
Oh, like a bandwidth problem?
Yeah, I mean, right now you sound great. It sounds like you stepped real far away from the phone or whatever. I know you're not. It's just that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. To let people know that this exact same chemistry that we're proposing to use in Lake Skaneateles in people's swimming pools at approximately 10 times higher than what we're proposing out in the lakes. Concerned about swimming, there is no problem with swimming in the lake after treatment with EarthTec. The EarthTec won't hurt you. It's approved for drinking water and for swimming.
Can't hear you.
immediately after.
Yeah, we can't hear you at all now, David.
Can't hear you at all.
Okay, well, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. But I feel like we may have to just skip it.
I would say, yeah, we could get to, just since we're already with 20 minutes left, I'd like to get to questions since there's been a
Yeah.
bunch coming through. And
I
then
saw a
maybe,
lot of the questions David would have addressed, so it's probably smart.
yeah. So you can try to stop sharing your screen maybe and see if that will help with your audio, hopefully. But yeah, I just want to make sure that we have time for question and answer for everyone. So for the question and answer, we'll be joined by presenters as well as a few other folks. So Ed Scheimer, let me know if I'm saying that wrong, Ed, who is the Director of Business Development and Eastern Regional Manager at Earth Science Labs. Mark Villard, I hope I'm saying that right too, Mark, who's the Director of Technical Services at Solitude Lake Management, and Jim Hyde, who is a research scientist at the New York State Department of Health Bureau of Water Supply Protections. So hopefully you all will be able to start your videos and the audio will work for everyone, but let me know if you have any issues with that. But I'll get into the question and answers. So the first question that we have says, as a Skaneateles resident who pulls water from the lake to drink and bathe, I'm concerned about the continued safety of the water for all of us. Can we say without a doubt that this will not affect our use of lake water to drink and bathe?
So I can address that question. All the research that's gone into this permit, so looking at 100 years of actually applying copper to the lake, I have not found one incident of any either environmental effect, one fish kill, or any health illnesses from any of the application of copper.
If I could just chime in on that too, as David was trying to get to, we use this exact same technology in swimming pools. We're probably in tens and thousands of swimming pools for 30 years at a rate that's 17 times higher than would go into the treated area. We've been treating drinking water for 30 years. Washington, D.C. has been using it for 25 plus years, not to mention hundreds of other plants. And it's NSF Standard 60 certified for drinking water. And that is not an easy certification to get. So as far as swimming in it, absolutely safe. Consumption, absolutely safe. And we actually use this in aquaculture, fish farming, for disease control. And it actually has an organic rating because it's a food, raising a food product. So it is ORMI listed, which is the organic policing body for food products.
And just one more, I have one more comment also. If you're a City of Syracuse resident, up until 2018, you've been drinking copper in your water, seasonally. In my case, for 53 years, I've had copper because I'm a city resident and drink out of the water source. So it's been a consistent application in city drinking water.
Great. Another question is, how do we communicate our opposition to the use of EarthTec to the city and to the DEC? I believe Matt put some of that information in the chat, but if anyone else wants to expand on that. Next question we have is, what exactly is direct supervision of a technician applying this product?
So a certified applicator for aquatic pesticide, in my case at Woodland Reservoir, it's our open water reservoir, I have to be on site to supervise an application, and anyone who's applying the pesticide actually is considered an applicator trainee. So they're actually go through coursework, and every time that they apply a pesticide, then that's logged. At the end of a season, we have to report on all the applications that were made to the DEC. So there's a reporting mechanism involved in that also.
Okay, another question is, in which natural ecosystem lakes around the country that provide drinking water has EarthTec been used to kill blue-green algae? How long was it in use in those locations? And were there health effects and ecosystem effects studied in those locations? And what were the results?
David, can you hear? Are you on?
Yeah, I can hear. Can
Okay,
you hear me?
I mean, the Bill Meyer Quarry in Pennsylvania, do you think that addresses that concern?
Are you hearing me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wasn't sure one instance of.
Actually, no, we're not.
Okay. Ed, you're qualified. You know, you can talk about it.
No, so yeah, I'll address that. So, you know, we also use the same formulation for battling invasive species, mollusks, zebra and quagga mussels specifically, and several others that we're learning each day. But I guess it was 6 or 7 years ago, Bill Meyer Quarry in Pennsylvania was riddled with mussels, and they could not pump water out of it into the Susquehanna Lake and River in Pennsylvania due to the fact they didn't, you know, just completely infest the river. So we went in, eradicated, I believe it was about a 50-acre body of water. We did the work with Solitude Lake Management. And there was a very short-lived effect on the ecosystem. And we've been doing eDNA testing for 4 years now as follow-up treatment. And the ecosystem, zooplankton, everything bounced back within weeks. So no fish kills, got rid of the invasive mussels. So therefore, they were able to pump the water back out in the Susquehanna River, but no detrimental effect on the ecosystem whatsoever. And honestly, I believe, and David can correct me, I think that's the first time a full eradication of an invasive species of a body of water has been done. So that's some really good data we have on the lack of detrimental effect on the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these questions from the audience are, you know, is this safe to use, and is it going to, you know, decimate the ecosystem?
David, so we still can't hear you, but
Okay.
one thing that you could do is if there's any questions that you think would be good for EarthTec to cover, you can actually type in an answer so that the attendees can see that.
Okay.
So that could be one way. Just since we're having some audio issues, you can still get the answers out there. So another question that we have is, this person is asking about Skaneateles having a limited watershed, asking about where all of the loading is coming from. So some of the nutrient loading, I'm guessing contributing to the harmful algae blooms is what they're talking about.
So a lot of these HAB events have been related to extreme weather conditions, 3 to 4 inches of rain at one time, and it doesn't necessarily have to be nutrient loading. What I've noticed is just a lot of these storm events actually take the balance, the healthy balance out of the lake, right? We get a lot of shading. Our turbidity goes from, say, a 0.5 NTU, which is very clear, to 1 to 2 to 5 NTU, right? So a lot of times, Microsystem, for example, they have a lot of ways to adapt, and they can float around in the lake column, come to the surface, shade out other algae. So there's a lot of competition going on out there. What's called species dynamics, which actually changes what's going on in the ecosystem. So these storm events have been one thing that really kind of signaled some of these significant blooms we've had. Definitely in 2017, it was a historic year for extreme weather events. 25 inches of rain in 3 months just completely destroyed the lake. Again, this year we've had 8 inches of rain, which was considered a 200-year storm in Spafford in a matter of 3 days. So it's been very disruptive with just rain events.
Okay, Julie asks a quick question. What is Earth Science Labs?
It's a privately held company based out of Rogers, Arkansas. We were founded in 1991, and it's our patented proprietary formulation that makes use of copper, enables us to get away with such low levels of copper and still be effective.
Okay, another question is, this person says, I'm in the treatment area. I get my water from the lake. How long before I can drink the water and shower after the treatment?
Immediately.
Great. This question is a little long. It says, if EarthTec remains in suspension up to 2 weeks, why is its application only in the North Basin, imposing restrictions to folks in that treatment zone, perhaps threatening ecology, fish, good algae, and even animals and humans? Some of this I'm not entirely sure. It looks like there's a bunch of questions, so I'll start with that one.
Not sure, quite sure I understand that.
Yeah, so our Hammond algae bloom action plan is actually focused around our drinking water intakes. So that's our focus for this species permit.
Gotcha. Another part of this question is, how high did the microsystem levels get in 2017 with just hyperchlorination?
I believe we were around 0.5, 0.7 micrograms per liter. They weren't extremely high. So our chlorine system wasn't really tested. The concern was it was following the blooms. Once the blooms were done, Microsystem stuck around in the lake for several weeks after, which was concerning. So even though there wasn't a visual bloom on the surface, things were going on maybe through the water column that were concerning. So what we're really concerned about is more persistent levels of toxin and how long did they actually stay in the environment.
A follow-up to that is, did the levels ever exceed 3 micrograms per liter?
0.3. In the open water, we did have a few detections that were, I believe, a bit higher than that.
Okay. Another question is, what other lakes with filtration avoidance waivers, not reservoirs, in New York State or nationally have used EarthTec?
What was the first part of that question?
What other lakes with filtration avoidance waivers, not reservoirs, in New York State or nationally have used EarthTec?
The no filtration, direct filtration like they have there, I'd have to look into that because you don't see that often, actually. I think David's going to touch on it. Down in West Nyack, New York, Lake DeForest, which is, I believe, a 1,100 acre lake, and the treatment area there is about 750 acres. So to give you an example, they switched from copper sulfate about 10 years ago. They were putting out 7,000 pounds of copper sulfate every 2 weeks. Now it's about half that with EarthTec, and they do about half as amount of treatments from May 1st to September, which the permit allows them to do. So they've reduced their copper usage in that large reservoir significantly and getting much better algae control and toxin control.
This person is asking about specific concerns related to fish kills near shore or even increasing levels of microcystin in the North Basin, or wherever application occurs.
Fish kills generally come from, if you have a very high algae count, it's the depletion of dissolved oxygen. And Mark Beller, he can address that. I mean, his company deals with that every day. It's not the product that bothers the fish. It's the crashing of the dissolved oxygen, a function of killing a lot of algae at one time. That's why it's really prudent to treat earlier with less algae than it is to let it get really bad, because then you do risk crashing DO. So by monitoring his levels and getting out there early is probably the smartest thing you can do.
I would agree. And I think as Rich mentioned in his presentation, where there are just partial lake treatments being performed, that's really an added safeguard. That's the best way to prevent against any adverse impact, is by only doing partial lake applications.
One person asked, is the active ingredient copper sulfate? Does this chemical reduce aquatic vegetation in addition to algal blooms?
I think Mark will back me up. Aquatic plants, vegetation, generally require some coppers are effective on them, other chemistries, which are generally not drinking water safe, or extremely high levels of copper. Right, Mark? Wouldn't you say? They're much more of a higher species of plant than algae is. They're tougher to kill.
Yeah, that's correct. Usually different formulations and much higher rates when copper is used as a herbicide. So when we have used EarthTec in the ponds and lakes we use and manage with EarthTec, we do not see any impact on vegetation.
Okay, another question is, earlier it was mentioned that the EarthTec product can remain as bioavailable in the water column for up to 2 weeks. Does it settle into the sediment thereafter?
Go back to Lake to Forest. They did a copper sediment test before they switched from copper sulfate to EarthTec. They did it the year after EarthTec because it was something new to the regulators, which I understand. And their copper sediments were fine in that lake. It's on demand. So our difference of our copper versus copper sulfate is very biologically available. So it really is like a cupric ion, a copper ion to an algal cell. So if you match them up properly by treating low, like Rich's plan does have, you should not have any precipitation of any copper. It's getting bound up by the organics. So we have seen no case in 30 years of any copper buildup in sediment.
Okay, this person says, as a lake resident, can I treat my local water intake area? I'm not entirely sure what they mean by that, but they're also asking if their understanding is that by killing the cyanotoxins, the algae bloom releases more I guess they're saying toxins. Isn't this potentially more of a concern?
So they have an intake right by where they are on the lake?
I'm guessing, yes, that's what they're referring to.
I would say now we had our label amended by the EPA. I would say a majority of our applications are directly into intakes of water treatment plants. And that is a whole nother line of benefits that it does with the chemistry inside the plant. Here we're talking about out in the raw water on the reservoir in the lake. But to let you know, that is done in many, many city drinking water plants and has been for years. They're feeding directly into the intake. So if I understand the question correctly, that should not be a concern at all.
One person is wondering if there's any other EPA approved treatments or strategies that have been assessed that have ingredients that don't persist in the ecosystem.
I know peroxide has been looked at as an option. I know the DC's done some work on peroxide. A few conversations I've had with Dr. Boyer from ESF, he's mentioned, that it's kind of a hit and a miss. It depends a lot on the water chemistry and different issues with that water body and how effective that would be. I don't know if Mark, if you've had any experience using peroxide.
Yeah, we have and have tried various formulations, and in certain situations it can be effective, but generally it's a much more costly and involved process to do peroxide treatments as opposed to copper. And we've had very good luck with these low dose copper treatments using EarthTec and manage reservoirs in Massachusetts and Connecticut with similar low dose programs to keep HABs from developing pretty effectively.
And I agree with Mark, peroxide has its place and it's effective in situations, but if there's any concern about algal toxins, there's this whole thing about the leaking cell theory or, cell lysis, peroxide is an oxidation chemical, right? And its function is busting cells. That's how chlorine kills. So you do not want to be oxidizing algal cells in a raw water situation. Certainly not one of that size.
Okay, we have a bunch more questions, but we are at 1 p.m. So I don't want to go over too much longer since we have about another 20 questions. So I guess what is the best way? I know, Rich, you said you'll take additional questions that people wanted to ask. I tried to make sure I asked a variety of questions. So some of them are a little bit redundant, but what is the best way for folks, if they have other questions or concerns, to get in touch and share those?
Yeah, they can email me directly. As Matt said earlier, the public comment period is still open. The DC will share the comments with me. So if people do want questions answered, I'd be glad to address those.
Okay, I'm going to share with everyone the contact information that Matt shared earlier, just so you guys have that email, and we can also send it up in a follow-up as well. But otherwise, we're at 1 o'clock, so I don't want to keep everyone too long. But yeah, thank you all to our panelists and our speakers. We'll figure out some way that we can share, maybe David, your presentation or something, that so that folks can have that information too. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining. Thank you to Julie Stenger and Janet Aaron from the town of Skaneateles for hosting us in their building today, for helping us. And I apologize for the technical difficulties as well. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to do meetings in person. But yeah, thank you all very much. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Yes, Frank, we will collect the unanswered questions. I will do that now, just to make sure and share that with everyone. So yes, thank you everyone, and have a great day.
Yes, thank you.